now?
I'm a little verklempt right now. It's September, it's back to school time, and it's that time of year.
I'm proof that you can teach an old dog new tricks. So this old dog is excited about the many new things ahead.
One salient moment of my journey into the deaf community was when I had to interpret for an event that was public. Row of eyes just staring at me. Of course, I'm pit sweating. We're back to another episode. And never once did I give myself that grace and space to say, this is new. This is new. Breathe a little.
Whatever it is that you're seeking, do it for yourself. You want to be loved, go love yourself. You want to be chosen, choose yourself. You want to be valued, value yourself.
You don't have to bring home every piece of feedback that's given to you.
There's so much to celebrate purely in the idea of the newness. That's applause in and of itself.
You went Brene Brown, Teddy Roosevelt, Lin-Manuel Miranda, all in the same episode. Welcome to Simply Enough. This is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Linnert.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio.
Dr. Ignacio, I got to say, I always look forward to recording with you. I love spending time with you. I love thinking about what we're gonna share with our listeners and our viewers. And to all of our listeners and viewers that are new, welcome. Thank you for being a part of our Simply Enough journey. And to our longstanding listeners and viewers, thank you for coming back. We're so glad you're with us.
We're grateful that you're with us. Thank you. I would like to kick it off again, if you don't mind. See, now, once you let me start once, now I'm like, okay, I can do another episode. But it's just because of so much that's going on in my life. I feel like I am just on the verge of this new season of my life because pulling back from previous episodes, the most recent episode is how we will be bringing our daughter to college, and quite the new experience. And another episode, we talked about age, and you know what? I'm proof that you can teach an old dog new tricks. So this old dog is experiencing a lot of new things in this season of my life, with our oldest child being ready and excited. And I'm excited for her as she goes off to college. And I just can't help but think, she's going to the East Coast, and here we are here in Hawaii. And a lot of people ask me, how am I handling that? And boy, that's so far. And, this dramatic so far, bum, bum, bum. And I mention to anybody who asks, I can't help but be excited for her. Of course, my mama heart breaks, but I can't help but be excited for her because of all of the new things that she's going to experience because she's going 5,000 miles away. And that's what I did. I was a local Hawaii girl who went to college on the East Coast and loved it. And there's just so many new experiences that are ahead of her that I'm so excited for. And there's a lot of new feelings and emotions, and a new season of my life with her leaving. And I'll say this, love you, Mikey, new season of Mikey's life, because now all of my attention is going to go on him. So it's just,
sorry, Mikey.
Yeah, we're Mikey, smother. It's not helicopter parent. It's like drone parent. But yeah, it's just, I just feel like as God does take us through different seasons of our life, that there's so much new ahead of me, ahead of the members of my family, so many new things ahead for my daughter's classmates, for my friends who their kids are leaving. So I'm just excited. This old dog is excited about the many new things ahead.
Mm-hmm. I like your choice of words there, excited, because it harkens back to a previous episode where you talked about what happens biologically when you're nervous and when you're excited is the same. It's just the label that you put on it. And so by choosing to say, I'm excited, it just changes your thinking a little bit more.
Yes.
Instead of saying, I'm nervous,
Right.
which might be true, and that's okay, right?
Right. And that's part of it. But
Right.
yes, I'll choose to focus on how exciting it will be for my daughter, how excited I am to see my son take the true spotlight in the house now. So the CEO of the house now moves to my son. Lots of new things ahead.
And it's that time of year, right? It's September. It's back to school time. There are many parents, I think, that are in similar situations. Maybe they're not sending their child to college, but perhaps it's the kindergartner or the pre-K little one's first day of school, and they're going away. They're going to a full day of school, and the parent has to drop them off. And then there's that moment. And as a former kindergarten teacher, I remember that moment of this 5-year-old, walking to this new classroom with this new teacher, and just the look on the parent's face. It really is a time of year where at least with school, there are a lot of new experiences happening. And
new experiences, new beginnings, a way to start fresh.
And there are some new teachers that are starting their first year, right? This is their first time in the classroom.
Thank you, teachers.
Thank you to the teachers. As I've talked about in previous episodes, I'm a trained sign language interpreter. And I was very fortunate in my quote unquote upbringing in the deaf community that I had a number of really strong deaf mentors who took me in and helped me learn the language and helped me learn the culture and taught me the idioms and the expressions and the things you shouldn't say and the things you should say and how you should say it and what the norms were of the community. And those weren't graces always afforded hearing people that were not born into deaf culture or the deaf world. So there's nobody in my family that's deaf. I didn't grow up with any deaf friends or anything. I came into it later in life. So this was a big blessing. Because of that, I wasn't always the most welcomed by interpreters who had been in the community a long time, right? So there was something new about me that was threatening, is the word that I would receive from other people. So anyway, one of my biggest and probably most salient moments of my journey into the deaf community and the deaf culture was when I had to interpret for an event that was very public. It was like my first major moment interpreting. And in the audience were a number of interpreters. My communication was with the deaf patrons in the front row, but the interpreters were sitting behind, and they could tell what I was doing, and they had their own thoughts about how they would interpret what I was saying or what I was hearing and everything. And I was acutely aware of that at the same time, but I'll get into that in a second. Okay. So this was a presentation, and it was at a university. And the reason why I got the job was because this was the university that I was going to school for. And so I knew the content, and this was another opportunity to really hone whatever skills I was learning in grad school about working with the deaf and the hard of hearing. Nonetheless, though, there were a lot of deaf and hard of hearing and interpreter people in the audience. So I was very, very nervous. I wouldn't have said that I was excited. I would have said I was nervous. So I work out with my partner. My partner is awesome. I feel incredibly safe. My interpreting partner was the one that asked me to do this job. Also really felt that my skills were a good match for this and really tried to pump me up. But we had a big conversation prior to starting about this being such a new experience for me and how this newness is done in front of all of these interpreters. And like in New York City, these are quote unquote big name interpreters, like names in the deaf community, the interpreting community, with just amazing skill. And they have worked for decades, and they are just stalwarts in the interpreting community. So of course I'm pit sweating. Now, if we remember back to another episode, have happy pads. So I made sure to wear a shirt that you couldn't see it. But my partner started, which was good because then I didn't have to, kick it off. Plus I knew the deaf patrons. They were friends of mine. They knew my language skills. I knew their language skills. So if they had a question, I felt very, very safe in the intimacy of the moment with the deaf patrons and my partner. But I did not feel as comfortable or as solid with everyone else that was in the audience. So I will say the job went okay. There were a couple points in just even the switch off where I went to get into the interpreting seat and my partner went to go and sit and kind of take a break, that I got a little distracted and missed like 30 seconds of whatever was saying. And then I had to play catch up, which you're often doing in interpreting anyways. There's a little bit of a lag that you work with. So at one point I had to turn to my partner, and my partner had to feed me what I had missed to then give it to give the translation or the interpretation to the deaf patrons. What I saw after that happened, so I kind of looked past the deaf patrons, and there were a couple interpreters, row of eyes just staring at me. And I saw a couple nods like, okay, just little things like that. And then I started to sweat even more and go into my own head of like, do I, all those internal narratives of, do I belong here? Like that self-doubt, all that anxiety and everything.
The itty bitty shitty committee in our heads.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And never once did I give myself that grace and space to say, this is new. This is new. This is, your inaugural moment in your interpreting life. So breathe a little, like it's, it's okay. And I had every reason around me to also believe it was okay. I knew the content. I knew the deaf patrons. I knew my partner. All of that felt very safe. Yet the newness of the entire experience and the public element of it made it very difficult for me. Afterwards, I met a couple of my friends who are also interpreters, and they were lovely, like, oh, congratulations. I bet it feels good to get that behind you, that you've now it's done, right?
Now it's done.
It's done. Yet one interpreter in particular had some less than lovely things to say to me largely about my actual ASL grammar, about how I needed to go back to ASL 1, ASL 2, and take a beginning class again because my subjects and pronouns were all over the place. And when I set up who I was talking about, I changed, and it was confusing to just this like list of feedback of things. And
who was this person contextually? Is he a professor and is used to giving critique like this? Did you ask him for critique? Give us a little context on this person. And I'll tell you, the reason why is in any situation, if we can step back and look contextually and the context of where the other person comes from, we can decide how much credence we're going to put on whatever comes out of that person's mouth. So contextually, who is this person?
Not a professor, somebody who had been interpreting for about 15 years, hearing person, did not grow up with a deaf parent, a deaf sibling, a deaf best friend, cousin, uncle, none of that, no relation to the deaf community. In very many ways, similar to me, came into learning ASL later in life, then pursued a career in interpreting. So this was essentially me 15 years of experience. Also, somebody who was passionate about participating in deaf advocacy, deaf rights, deaf education. So, this person was a name many people knew, one, because of her interpreting ability, and two, because of the way in which she went all in to support deaf rights, et cetera. Right. So it wasn't just a job, right? This was a career. This is a profession for her.
Her thing, her calling, maybe.
I didn't really know her. I knew her in passing socially. And even still, when I saw her socially out, I never got any kind of feedback from her about my production, my grammar, any of that. So we didn't have the kind of relationship where, one, I was used to getting that kind of feedback, and two, that I would seek it out from her. So to answer your questions, so this is what she told me a couple of years later was this was just her trying to help me. It didn't really help me, I will say.
Sure.
A couple of things just related to the newness of this. I still remember, and actually I'm sweating right now thinking about this, that very moment of people who are going into a new experience and what they're thinking and feeling in that. And then also for others who are witnessing somebody go through something new, and the grace and space, to use a phrase that you often say on this podcast, that we can offer others in recognition of what they're going through, because we all know what that experience is like. And for an interpreter, especially, I would have loved if there was more of that bestowed upon me by her. And that impacted me to go forward in my moments when I'm observing a new teacher in the classroom as their principal, as their school leader, or even at let's say a store, and it's somebody's very first day on the job. And they even say that they're having a hard time maybe at the register or something, and they seem flummoxed, and you're just like, hey, how's it going? They're like, oh, it's my first day on the job. I'm like, okay, great. Well, I'm glad now I get to be this person for you so that, you can, it's fully safe for you to be you, Anyway, so this is a very long story. Forgive me for going on and on.
It's great.
But I just thought about those of us who go through something new in such a public way and everything wrapped up with that. And then what we can do to support others when we are privy to their newness and that new experience, to be able to give them grace and space in that learning moment, that critical learning moment, to step out into something brand new, and then to charge forward with it.
There's so much in there, actually, to talk about or focus on. I giggle because one of the phrases that I tell to my clients, my coaching clients, is go blank yourself, go blank yourself. And by blank, I don't mean the curse word. I don't mean the profanity. I literally mean, like, if you were to write it out, it's a blank and you fill in the blank. And what I mean by that is whatever it is that you're seeking, do it for yourself. So you're seeking to be spoiled, go spoil yourself. Do you want to be loved? Go love yourself. Do you want to be chosen? Choose yourself. Do you want to be valued? Value yourself. So that's my go blank yourself. And I can't help, as I was listening to your story, that as much as absolutely, I totally feel you. I'm right there with you. It would have been nice had this person, let's give the benefit of the doubt, with good intent, in this person's own way and own personality, in giving you critique, would it have been ideal in what you needed at the time, as opposed to critique, perhaps at the moment, some celebration and acknowledgement of you? Absolutely. But you want to be celebrated, celebrate yourself, because you had every reason to celebrate yourself. If anything, while that story can be a teaching example of how can we show up for others to be supportive, I also would love to use that your story as a teaching example of how we can find reasons to celebrate ourselves. Again, back to a previous episode, meaning not only do we give ourselves the okay and the space and grace of, like, well, it's my first time. And so it's, B- work changes the world. And this is something that we can build upon to be better, so that, my inaugural ASL interpretation to the public world is behind me now. Those are all true. And that's wonderful. And it's more than okay. It's more than, okay, well, I got it done. So now it's behind me, which it is. But there's even reason to go to the other end of the spectrum of, not only is it just okay and it's behind you, it's hot damn, that was my inaugural time and I did it. And so for this moment right now where I'm in, I'm going to celebrate that I did something new, and I'm not even going to grade it or judge it or evaluate it. Maybe later, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, I will look back and what lessons have I learned and how can I build upon this? But right now, damn it, I'm going to celebrate myself. I'm going to honor myself. So that person who in her own way was trying to give support, that's her own way, but she didn't really give me kind of the boost and the hug or the pat on the back that I needed. I'm going to give it to myself. I'm going to hug myself. I'm going to pat myself on the back. I'm not going to live in that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, it's not that you're going to, rest on your laurels. That's the complacency component. But right now I'm going to live in not just the contentment of it being my new experience, but in the joy and the celebration that I took on and I showed up for this new experience. And then even more so, kudos that it was in a public forum. I can't help but it just harkens back to one of my favorite TED Talks of all time, which is Brene Brown and her first talk of vulnerability, and how she quotes Teddy Roosevelt's poem about being, the man, the person in the arena, that it's not the critics that count. They're the ones in the nosebleed portion of the arena, in the stadium, hooting and hollering, but they're not in there in the arena with the blood, sweat, and tears. So you know what? Applaud yourself for showing up, for being there, for taking on this momentous inaugural new experience, and then never mind the critics, at least for that time. And yes, applaud also that it was very public, that it was that you didn't just do something new, which is important and amazing and growing experience. Like I said, my daughter's new experiences in college, many will be public, many will be private.
Right.
And each and every new episode is an opportunity, yes, to learn, but also just for that moment, an opportunity to celebrate the newness of it, public or private.
For me, it was about balance, and I didn't recognize the balance in that moment, that I was so overtaken by the feedback that the person gave me about my interpreting that I missed the feedback that my interpreting partner had given to me prior to coming into that interpreting moment, which was I had skill, I had grammar, I had value, I had good interpretation, I had content knowledge, that I just didn't recognize that at the same time, that there was already balance in the newness. Rather than walking away and feeling like, oh, I have nothing to offer, it was like, oh, no. I already started with a surplus. There was balance already there that I didn't see.
And isn't it amazing, unfortunately, and I know I'm definitely this way, that no doubt you got tremendous feedback and support from a number of people at this inaugural event. Yet what seems to stick in your mind? And that's the same thing with me. If I have a patient, and I'm so blessed with such wonderful, gracious, loving, kind, grateful, generous patients. But when there's the one patient that's difficult and not pleased, that's the one that I take home with me. Why? Why focus on that negative? Take what you will from whatever want to and can gain from that one person who, I think it's more their personality than it was personal about you, but their personality of critiquing. Take whatever you want from them. But boy, there's so much that our brain naturally, it doesn't register because our brain just kind of perseverates on the negative. And same thing with me. A patient that might not have been happy with me or my staff, whatever I want to glean from that, from a valid critique, it behooves me and it betters me in the long run to take that into account. But wow, let's not forget not only the balance, but probably actually the scales were tipped positively, yet we focus on the negative, right?
Yep. What have you said in the past? You don't have to enter every fight you're invited to. What is it?
Yeah. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Yeah.
You don't have to bring home every piece of feedback that's given to you. Right. I mean, I didn't have to do anything with that other than like, oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And like, drop it somewhere. Yeah.
Because if you really, again, with the scales, it's not even balanced. The scales is truly tipped. There's so many amazing things about that inaugural event of yours, that it was new, that you did do well, that there was positive feedback, that you showed up for something new, not just the actual event, but again, hearkening back to the previous steps, that you took on a new skill of American Sign Language. Like there's so much that's so wonderful and positive in that new moment, in that new event, that event itself, and then what preceded it. There's so much. Yet to focus on that other person and that other person's critique and that other person's vibe and gist and aura, and then the fact that person brings it back again, years later or months later, so much has been kind of watered down and whitewashed because of the focus on that other person's critique. There's so much to celebrate purely just in the idea of the newness, the theory of something new, the theory of showing up and stepping up and volunteering and inviting yourself to something new. that alone, it doesn't matter the outcome, that you showed up, that you learned the skill, that you are doing that event. That's applause in and of itself.
It really is.
Right? Because of the newness.
Yep. That moment, you're right, is worth celebrating.
Right. One can find oneself in a new situation, but with tons of experience, but it's still new. I can't help but think about how it then harkens to a tangent of a thought when we talk about new experiences, inaugural experiences, a slight tangent relative to first impressions. So you can show up for something and it's the first time that you do that, and there is pressure about it if you choose to put pressure on the fact that it's the first time. But there's also first impressions where even if you have a wealth of experience, if it is your first impression, you still have to prove yourself, if you choose to look at it that way, or live up to certain expectations, with the first impression. This is such a tangent, but what I think about a new experience for me on a slightly different tangent, in case our listeners or readers are like, well, I can't really think right now of something that I tried for the first time. Okay, but there's still new experiences and new situations, even with a background and a training that you bring with you. And what I mean by that is when I moved back to Hawaii, and I was, with a background of sports medicine, I had the opportunity to meet the athletic trainers, many just in the sports world, because it was a sports medicine conference where my partner at the time was very, very gracious and wanted me there at this conference, not only for me to actually, give a talk, but also then, of course, in our community, so much is relational. It was an opportunity to meet people. And my partner at the time, again, we're no longer partners, but I recognize really how gracious it was of him, who was a well-established sports medicine orthopedic surgeon. He was very gracious and wanted me to be introduced as his partner to these people of the sports medicine profession so that they could meet me and I could get to know them. But of course, he is the one that's, been the long-standing established sports medicine physician at the time. So I'll never forget. And I was grateful that he held me in high esteem, knowing my background, that he wanted me to be a part of the mix in terms of the sports medicine staff and sports medicine coverage, because he trusted me and he recognized the value that I brought to the table. So anyway, long story, talk about long stories. That was that. He introduced me to the athletic training staff of the University of Hawaii, our Division I program here. And here in Hawaii, because we don't have professional sports, coverage of the University of Hawaii, that's kind of a little bit the only game in town. And it really, really matters. And it's an honor and a privilege, which I recognize. And so upon being introduced, Dr. Muramoto was so gracious and said, and this is my partner. And, she is local girl, grew up here, but had lived on the mainland or the continent for all this time. But now she's back home in Hawaii. And I said to the athletic trainers, I'm happy, to help in any way. And here's my cell phone number. Should you need anything, I'm ready, willing, able, and available. And one of the senior athletic trainers, who is now truly I wouldn't call her one of my best friends. I would truly call her one of my sisters. And she's family to me. And I'm grateful that she sees me as family. But we do joke about this. And I do tell many, a student athlete who sees how close we are. Oh, we didn't start off that way. That's not how we started off. And what I mean by that is when I said that, and I meant that with an open heart and with humility, she looked me up and down with that look and with her eyes, literally looking with their gaze of up and down. When I said, so please feel free to call on me, she looked me up and down and she said, "We'll call Dr. Muramoto first." And I was like, yeah. And she did. And I was like, okay. And I could have approached that moment with anger and with defiance and with, well, I'll show you and I'll prove you. And then come to that with all this pressure on myself and this pressure that I'm putting on them in how I'm perceiving them, how I'm labeling them, where I could have been pushy and been defensive and spewed off my resume right then and there. Are you kidding? Of the sports medicine doctors, second only probably to Dr. Morimoto, I'm the only one that has, I have the most NCAA Division I experience, professional sports, semi-pro sports coverage, Olympians.
Right.
So I could have spewed at that moment because I wanted to make a particular first impression and I wanted to prove myself that I'm not new at this. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I recognize I'm new back in town. And so, you know what? Kudos to her that she is protective of her student athletes and she's protective of this culture and this microcosm of Division I athletics at the University of Hawaii. So she's protective. And so she's not, I'm the newbie. So she should be wary of me. And I took that into account contextually. Mm-hmm. So rather than getting upset or angry about it, I said, no, you know what? I have to prove myself. And this is not the way to prove myself isn't by shoving down my resume down their throats or being haughty and offended, but I'll just earn my stripes here. And I think that if they get to know me and not only see me professionally, but get to know me as a person and where my heart is and why I do what I do and why I love my vocation, I will hopefully transition from the newbie rookie status, though I'm no rookie, to the world of sports medicine. And again, like I said, if anything, I have at that time, and certainly by now, a vast wealth of experience, more than most, to be honest, but that's not what's going to help this situation, help me, and help build this connection and build this relationship. And guess that was 2006. So guess who throughout the 16 years who have been some of my most loyal, supportive friends and professionally referral sources. It's the athletic trainers at the University of Hawaii. And it's because of, I think, how I approached being the newbie and recognizing that this is a new experience for me. I am new in this particular situation and new in this particular environment. And so despite the fact that I bring this resume with me and my wealth of professional experience with me, give myself space and grace of recognizing that this is new for me and this is a new situation. These are new people and they might not like me from the get-go, and I'm not going to vilify them, but I'm also not going to let it weigh heavy on me. And I'll just go moment by moment and show up. And in the moment to moment showing up, the outcome might be what I want it to be or not, but at least moment to moment, I have shown up with self-compassion and space and grace of recognizing every moment is a new moment. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense. Oh, it totally makes sense.
It's a little opposite, yet similar to your story.
I started this off by sharing my first major interpreting moment in front of a large group of people. But what I didn't say is that as a hearing person in the deaf community, there were so many moments of like, no, you're new. Just be new, be there, take everything in, be a part of it. Your worth is already valued because you're here, you're in the room. Like, you don't now need to be the smartest person in the room or the best at ASL. No. Like, you're in the room. So let's celebrate that. Right. So the reason why it makes a lot of sense to me is because that was the gift that was given to me by the deaf community that was so gracious and welcomed me in. They welcomed me in, but they also were just like, just breathe now, just breathe. Like, your whole job is to just kind of listen, participate, show us who you are, but relax a little bit. You've already proven yourself by getting into in the room, by getting into the community. So it totally makes sense to me. How did you, I mean, we've talked about in previous episodes of the idea of we don't always point the finger at somebody else. We can point it back at ourselves and look at ourselves and what we offer and what we bring. How did you come to that level of awareness? Because I could see myself being like, oh, I'm going to, like, even my reaction was like, oh, she did it, you know?
It was that perspective was in a way kind of forced on me. What I mean by that, it has nothing to do with that particular moment.
Yeah.
I arrived at that moment with that perspective because that perspective was forced on me earlier, meaning as a woman in orthopedics. What I specifically mean by that is, again, forgive me, listeners, you might be tired of hearing this, but I'm just stating fact, right? That 94% of the world's orthopedists are men. So when I, as a fourth year medical student, decided, or really it's not even so much a conscious choice, I just accepted the calling that was I was clearly feeling of wanting to go into orthopedics. I recognized that I am wanting to be in the room. I can't help but keep thinking of the song in Hamilton, the musical, In the Room Where It Happens. I just want to be in the room where it happens. I wanted to be in ortho. And so here I am, 5'1" Filipina female wanting to be in that room. So I have to already recognize a place of humility as opposed to defiance. And one can try to beat the door down to be in the room, but then once you're in the room, then what? Then how do things happen? So I just approach it like, well, I want to be in the room. I'm the female that wants to be in the fraternity. So I can be defiant and try to beat the door down, and great if I'm in the room, but then now I've started off with my foot in the room already with a chip on my shoulder. Or I can recognize I'm the one that wants to be in this fraternity. I'm the one that wants to be in the room. So how can I best garner an invitation? Well, the best way to garner an invitation is just kind of recognizing the perspective of the others. And then in it turning out, I was very blessed that not only do I feel lucky that I got an orthopedic residency spot, but that it was told to me directly, actually, that Georgetown wanted me. So I was very grateful for that knowledge going into what's called the residency match program, where you learn whether or not you get to do the specialty you want. So then now, upon recognizing, oh, thank God that I get to be a part of the fraternity because I did match in orthopedic surgery, but then the recognition that I matched at the program that I matched in, meaning they haven't had another woman in 15 years prior. I wasn't the first, but there wasn't another woman 15 years prior to me. And I was the third in the 50-year history. So I'm already recognizing not only am I going to be an orthopedic surgeon, but in order to be one, I'm going to have to go through this program where it is primarily, I'll say it, old school, East Coast alpha male. So it behooved me to take a position of, I won't say one down or less than, but it behooved me to recognize that in my being the minority, it will be a more enjoyable experience if I try to recognize and learn the perspective of the group that I'm wanting to join. And that was a humbling experience, very much so. Sometimes it didn't have to be as humbling as I think it needed to be, but that's neither here nor there. I'm grateful for that experience, but it was that perspective was forced on me because I wanted to be in the room. So that perspective, that 5-year-long residency program, and then being the first female in my sports medicine fellowship program on the West Coast, that has been my journey of, well, I can either try to come into the room guns a-blazing, or I think it is a much more enjoyable experience if, when appropriate, I recognize that no matter what I may bring with me in terms of my accolades, awards, academics, whatever, to come from a place of humility and speaking of being in the room, I love being the dumbest person in the room. I love absorbing. I love learning. I love gleaning from others. And I think that stance and perspective has helped me relationally and has helped me connect so as to not just be invited into the room, but then feel a part of the room. And I think that's where the connections and relations have come from, was from that perspective.
Well, oh my God, you said so many delicious things. Well, first, I also just want to give you a nod. You went Brene Brown, Teddy Roosevelt, and Lin-Manuel Miranda all in the same episode, which is not uncommon for any new listeners or viewers. Dr. Ignacio just populates our episodes with names that are all over the place, and it's fantastic. So Teddy
Because
Roosevelt.
they're not my thoughts. They're not
but
my thoughts. So I feel they're so worthwhile sharing because they're not my thoughts. I'm just sharing them.
But you said something pretty astute that reminded me of that moment for myself when I was interpreting, which was I was already invited. I was invited by this interpreter who had been in the room many years and had learned the room and still saw something of value in me to ask me to be a part of it. The perspective that I got in that moment that I'm now realizing is even if that other interpreter gave me feedback that was very direct, which is common in the deaf community, is to receive very direct feedback. Some may interpret that as harsh. There was still a balance to that, which was somebody who was saying, I see so much in you and you belong here. So I'm going to bring you into this. Similarly, Georgetown said, we want you. So I think for myself, I'm going to try and remember that rather than come out guns a-blazing. How did I get into this spot in the first place? I think the acknowledgement of how I got there into that moment of newness, if it's with a new culture, a new community, of the mentors that brought me in and what messaging that gives me as well. Does any of that make sense? I feel like I'm not.
It does. It definitely makes sense in terms of the recognition of others and the gratitude for others. Yes. And if you'll allow me,
yes,
I want to add that one nuance component, which is back again to the go blank yourself, which is this: don't wait to be invited, because you invited yourself to learn American Sign Language. I invited myself to even consider going into orthopedics. You know what I mean? Like, of course it helps once you show up, once you give yourself the self-belief and the self-empowerment to invite yourself to even entertain being invited. That is the first step. And I specifically say this with the awareness that kids are off to college, kids are off to starting a new school year, adults are considering a new job, considering a new relationship, dating a person. Invite yourself. There are moments where you best serve yourself by inviting yourself, as opposed to waiting on the sidelines, waiting on the outskirts of the group, waiting to be invited. Show up and invite yourself and see the many opportunities that then befall you because you said, I'm going to invite myself to this group. Oh, this tour is going around. I'm going to step a little bit more forward in the tour so I can hear the tour guide better. And then thus invite myself into the conversation. And then by inviting myself into that conversation, now I can create connections and I can create relations. To always wait to be invited, think of the opportunities missed out. Yes, I was invited to go into orthopedics because I interviewed and matched in an orthopedic surgery program. But still, somewhere along the lines, I had to decide and invite myself to that possibility and say, hey, Ignacio, you can be an orthopedic surgeon. There's stuff you have to do about it. And there's a method in order to do that you have to, go through this process, but invite yourself to show up to that process. Hey, Zachary, you are interested in in learning American Sign Language, and then even not only just learn it, but then go so far as to actually serve as an interpreter. There's still that first step where you invited yourself to that and you were open to that possibility and to that opportunity. And then you took it by learning American Sign Language. This invitation to be an interpreter in such a public forum, that's further down the journey. There's so many steps that preceded that you invited yourself and you took that opportunity and you took that possibility and you gave yourself that invitation first. And I just want to focus also on that yes, let us be grateful for, as life is always better being grateful for something or somebody, and to take that perspective of gratitude to others. I just also want to point out for those, so many people in such this new phase in their life, new opportunity, new possibility that befalls them privately or publicly. Celebrate your inviting yourself and not waiting to be invited also.
I have a huge smile on my face because we have talked offline about we will have conversations with friends or family or whatever, and somebody's bringing up something and we're like, oh, that's episode 17. Go listen to episode 17. Or, oh, that's episode 20. Go listen to that, right? So listeners, viewers, bookmark, download, save this episode. No joke. Because we will all have that moment right before something new. And I think Dr. Ignacio's words will always ring true no matter what it is. So bookmark this episode so that you have it at the ready to remind yourself to go blank yourself, like you said, to invite yourself. It is so incredibly simple and powerful at the same time. And that little reminder, if you just play Dr. Ignacio's voice, right before you go out on stage, or right before you go out to interpret, or you drop your child off at kindergarten or college, or your first day in the classroom, or maybe you're running a meeting. It's your first time running the meeting in front of, I don't know, the C-suite of your company, whatever it is, go blank yourself and you've already invited yourself. So celebrate that. Save it. This is a good one. Seriously.
New is life. Really, new equals life. If we don't experience the new, if we don't invite ourselves to the new, if we're not open to the new, then what is life for? Same old, same old? Been there, done that? Life is in the new. Get busy living or get busy dying, right? Life is in the new. And we are a part of that new. We start the new. We start the first page, we start the first paragraph, we start the first, we start the first word, we start the first encounter, day one, chapter one, page one, new, first, all of that stuff is where life is.
I think that's a great place to end it. So thank you so much. I just,
can I say this though? Every
Please.
Conversation with you, which I love, and I think this is why there's just such life in the conversations we have. And I don't even mean just the podcast. Everybody, there are some conversations you all miss that we don't record. And I think why I get so juiced and so energized and get such life out of every conversation I have with you, Zachary, is it's like every time everything is new. Even when we harken back to oh, well, remember when we talked about this and remember when we talked about that, there's always something new there. There's always something so life-giving in our conversations because there's always something new that we learn about each other, learn about ourselves, learn about the others that, with whom we're in relation. And I'm just so, speaking of gratitude, I'm just so grateful for the life-giving newness that you bring to every conversation I have with you. So thank you.
Wow. I'm a little verklempt right now.
Love you, everybody. This podcast has definitely been a new journey for us, and every episode's a new episode for us and a new experience. Thank you for inviting ourselves into your lives by listening and viewing, and also thank you for inviting us into your lives when you've shared comments and you've reached out to us. You matter to us. You mean so much to us. Thank you for being a part of this new journey in this season in our lives.
And don't forget that you are simply enough.
Just as you are. Period. Love you.
Love you.